Good morning. My name is Professor Deborah Harmon. Today I'm going to be talking to you about APA 7th edition. In this session, I'm going to be talking to you about in-text citations, reference-less citations, and then finally the APA paper format. One important distinction I wanted to point out is that this session is going to be focusing on APA 7th edition. The APA 7th edition came out in October of 2019, and there are a number of changes between the 6th edition and the 7th editions. So make sure you clarify with your professor whether you're using the 6th edition or the 7th edition. Again, this session is focusing on the 7th edition of the manual. So the first thing we're going to talk about are APA in-text citation. One thing to note about in-text citations in APA is that these are the citations within the actual body of your paper itself. So this is how you let your reader know that, hey, I'm pulling this information from somebody else. And this is always also going to correspond to a list in your reference list. So you'll have the in-text citation element and then your reference list. So with APA in-text citations are a name-date citation style. So every time you have a name, you'll have a date that follows right after it. So one of the things that impacts our citation is the number of authors we have for that source. We have two major scenarios. We either have 1 to 2 authors or 3 or more authors. First, let's examine 1 to 2 authors. 1 to 2 authors is pretty straightforward. Every time you have 1 to 2 authors, you write all the authors' names out and the date. There are two major types of citations in APA. Either you have a narrative citation or a parenthetical citation. Sometimes we see students want to put the full name of the article in their paper. Don't do that. Since APA is a name-date citation style, all you need to do is again put the author and the date. So for a narrative citation, I write out within the sentence, a study by Bowden 2019 argues. Or if I had 2 authors, I would write it out. Research by Horn and, notice I write the word A-N-D out, Harmon 2018, and then continue on. The other major type of in-text citation that we see is a parenthetical citation. So this is kind of like a little abbreviated statement at the end of our either quote or our paraphrase. And so if we have one author, all we do is simply open with parentheses, write out the author's name, comma, and the date. And if we have 2 authors, we write out the names, and you'll notice that here we use an abbreviated and, so the little ampersand followed by the year. Now what we're going to look at is if we have 3 or more authors. So for a narrative citation, so again something within the body of the paper, you're including your in-text citation in your writing. I'm going to write out according to Harmon et al. So notice if you have 3 or more authors, you list the first author, and this is followed by this phrase et al. So E-T-A-L period, and then the year. If you identify a citation with 3 or more authors for the first time in a parenthetical, so that little abbreviated version at the end of your either direct quote or paraphrase, you'll include Harmon, the first author, again, followed by et al., period, a comma, and then the year. One thing we sometimes see students try to do is take an individual article and then reorganize the authors so that they're alphabetical. Don't do this. The person who is listed as the first author is the one that did the most work, so they get first credit. The next thing I'm going to talk about is direct quotes. So a direct quote is when you pull text exactly as it's written in the original source, put it in quotation marks, and then include that into your paper. APA has some very specific rules for what you include in the in-text citation for direct quotes, and now we're going to talk about it. So in APA for a direct quote, you need to have 3 primary pieces of information. You need to have the author, the date, and then a page number. So let's examine this a little bit more closely. So for a narrative citation, so one that is written within the text of my paper, I articulate the author and then the date, and then I include the quote, and at the very end of that I include the page number. One thing that you'll notice is that instead of putting the period right before the quotation mark, which a lot of people do, you actually put the period at the very end of the page number statement. Now with a parenthetical citation, again, that's that little abbreviated version of an in-text citation. What you do is you include all that information together. So at the end of the quote, I put the author or authors, the date, and then the page number, and then follow that with a period. Now sometimes when we're doing our citations, and these are direct quotes, we don't have page numbers. So what we do instead is we include the paragraph number. So if you're using a website, for example, what you can do is count down the number of paragraphs, and then wherever you pulled that direct quote, you can put paragraph, P-A-R-A period, and then the paragraph number. So now we're going to talk about paraphrases. Paraphrasing is effectively when you put something you've read into your own words. This isn't just changing out words like with the thesaurus. This is really kind of synthesizing and putting something that you've read into your own words. What you'll notice with your writing is that as you progress, a lot of times we start out, we're using a lot and leaning more on a lot of direct quotes, but as you advance in your studies and you advance as a writer, you'll notice that more and more you will be paraphrasing. So for a paraphrase, all I need is the author or authors and the date. So if this was 3 or more authors, I would do Jones et al. 1998, but since this is only one author, all I need to include is Jones 1998. And if I did the parenthetical, all I need to do is include the author or authors and the date at the very end of the parenthetical. Again, there is no need to put a page number on a paraphrase. Next, let's talk about abbreviations in APA. So when dealing with in-text citations, sometimes what we have, instead of having an individual who's authored a work, sometimes we'll have an organization that has authored something. A lot of times you'll find this on reports or things that you find on the web or websites. And for many of these corporate authors, they will have common abbreviations. So for example, the American Psychological Association is the APA, the National Library of Medicine is the MLM. And so what APA permits us to do is with an in-text citation, we can indicate to our readers that there's an abbreviation, and then throughout the rest of our paper, simply use that abbreviation in place of the author. So to set this up, we need to indicate to our reader that we have a corporate author with a common abbreviation. So the first time I see it is in a narrative citation, so written within the sentence. I'll write out, research according to the American Psychological Association. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the abbreviation just before the date in that space. And then every other time I see that article, all I need to do is research according to APA 2019, or if I use it as a parenthetical every other time, I just do APA 2019. Now, if the first time we see it is in a parenthetical citation, since it's already in parentheses, I'm going to write out the parentheses, American Psychological Association, and then in square brackets, I indicate to my reader what that abbreviation is, and then put the date and then close the parentheses. And again, I can refer to it as APA 2019 or APA 2019 from there throughout the entire paper. One of the other pieces of guidance that APA provides us is how to deal with numbers in APA. So numbers in APA have specific rules. So if I'm articulating something that is numbers 1 through 9, I will express them as words, and 10 and above will be expressed as numerals. So for example, the control group contained numeric 17 participants, because that's above 10, 9 of whom were female, and 8 of whom were male, because these are under 9. Now, it wouldn't be APA if there weren't exceptions. So the exceptions to that general rule we already stated is if something is a unit of time, a date, age, or that broad category of math. So, for example, if I have an age, someone is 2 years old, that will always be numeric 2. If I have a date, that will always be numeric. And then if I have something that's, say, like a percentage, that is always going to be numeric as well. And the exception to that exception is if you begin a sentence. You never begin a sentence with a number. So as you can see here, for example, I have 48%, so I'll write out 48% and then numeric 2 here. If this wasn't beginning a sentence, I would have numeric 48%. One of the things we see students struggle with a lot is how to balance in-text citations within a long paraphrase. So if you're writing a paper, maybe you're doing a literature review, and you talk about one source throughout an entire paragraph. What we sometimes see students do is put a citation at the beginning and citation at the end, but there's actually more of an art to it. What we need to do is to let our readers first know that we're talking about a source, and then that we're paraphrasing the ideas of that article throughout the entire paragraph. So this is an example of an article written by one person. And so what we do is kind of let our readers know that we're talking about a long 2018 article. And so we started out with long 2018 described. Now, instead of trying to do a citation at the end of every single sentence, what we can do is kind of weave a thread throughout the paragraph. So instead of putting long 2018 at the next sentence, we write, the author went on to outline. They listed the following mistakes. So as you can see, we're kind of maintaining that thread throughout the entire paragraph without doing an in-text citation on every sentence. One of the things I love about the new manual is that they have lots of great examples of what good citation balance in a paragraph looks like. So if you want to learn more about this, check out Chapter 8 of the actual APA manual. Now there are some things to keep in mind when doing this. One thing to keep in mind as you're moving through and doing in-text citations is that sometimes there are times when we need to reestablish the in-text citation. So if you're talking about one article for the first part of the paragraph, but then you start using another article in the second part of the paragraph, you need to make it clear to your reader who you're talking about. And so, of course, you'll have to articulate that in-text citation for every single article and make that super clear. Also, say you're talking about a source in one paragraph and then start a new paragraph. In that new paragraph, even if you've kind of been weaving that thread in that first paragraph, when you start that second paragraph, you have to reestablish that citation so that your reader knows that, hey, I'm still talking about that source in this paragraph, and then continue to balance the citation within the remainder of that paragraph. Finally, though, if you are unsure, always err on the side of oversighting rather than underciting. If you're not 100% comfortable with this yet, and leaving out some of the citations and balancing those citations, again, always err on the side of oversighting rather than underciting, because underciting can be a form of plagiarism and have academic integrity implications. So this sums up our bit of in-text citations. The next thing we're going to talk about are referenceless citations in APA 7th edition. So with the APA 7th edition manual, they introduced this four-element concept. The four elements of a referenceless citation are who, which is the author, when, which is the year, what, which is the title, and then where, which is the source information. In this portion of the presentation, I'm going to talk about how to cite journal articles, books, and then finally websites. Before I get started here, though, I did want to caution you about the use of citation tools. Even the library databases sometimes have this function. We know that there's a lot of online tools, but those tools often make mistakes. I encourage you to go ahead and learn the fundamentals of the citation style. And so even at a later time, if you do end up using one of those tools, you know enough about how to correct those citations so that when you turn your paper in, you actually have the correct citation style and format. So essentially, just don't trust those citation generators. Learn some of the fundamentals, and then you'll be better prepared if you do decide to use any of those tools at a later time. So one thing to note about the reference list, if you're moving from MLA to APA, instead of putting the word works cited at the top of your reference page, you simply put the word references. So let's start by examining a journal article with a DOI. So a DOI is a digital object identifier. And so DOIs are usually found either at like the top part or the bottom part of your article. Usually there's a little citation statement, and there will be a DOI and then a 10-dot number. Sometimes you'll see an http.dx.doi.org or doi.org, but there's always this 10-dot number. That is the actual DOI. So if we have a journal article with a DOI, and most journal articles, academic peer-reviewed journal articles, will have a DOI, they're going to follow this form. So the first part of a reference list citation with a DOI is the author or authored. In APA, you articulate the author by listing the author's last name and then their initials. So for example, here we have Sarah Kate Behrman, and so when we see their names in the citation, we do Behrman, comma, S period, space, K period, and then we have the second author, Eric Stice, and so all we have is his first name, so we do Stice, comma, E. And that's all it is for a author. The next thing we need to include is the date. So again, I go back to that little citation statement, and I see here that it is an article dated from 2008. And so then after the author, I'm going to open up some parentheses, put the date, and then follow that with a period. The next part of the citation is the article title. So here we have the name of the actual article we're reading, so testing a gender additive model. And then what I do after the date is I include the name of the article, but what you'll notice about APA is that it adheres to something called sentence case. And what this means is you capitalize the first word of the title, so here we capitalize testing, and then if we have a subtitle which is identified with a colon, we capitalize the first word after that, but everything else is going to be lowercase. The main exception to this is if you have a proper noun, so someone's name, you will of course capitalize their name. But everything else is going to be lowercase except the first word of the title, and then if you have a subtitle, the first word there. This is one of the key things that the citation generators get wrong over and over and over again. The next piece we're going to look at is the journal title, so the name of the publication itself. So this was a journal article in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology. Sometimes you'll see these abbreviations. What APA wants you to do is write out the full name of the article, which is the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology. And what you'll notice about that is that this follows title case, so all of the major words will be capitalized, and the name of the publication is also going to be italicized. We then follow this by a comma, and then we articulate the volume. If I have the volume number, so we can see here the 36 is the volume number. Sometimes you see a VOL period and then a number. So all I need to do is include the volume number here. And if I just have the volume number, I just include the volume number. If I have the volume and the issue number, you can include both of those. The next example is going to show you how to include the issue number. And so I simply go up here, I get the volume number, I enter it, and it is also italicized, and then I include a comma. We then close out this part of the citation by including the entire page number range, so not just the pages we use, but the entire page number range, and then we put a period. And then the next thing we're going to include is the DOI statement. So to include your DOI, it needs to be formatted just like this. We need to start out with https://doi.org and then a /, and then you'll notice here that this is the actual DOI number. Sometimes you'll see DOI : or http.dx.doi.org. Both of those are technically incorrect because that's from the older 6th edition. So what the 7th edition wants you to do is simply put the doi.org / and then the DOI number. What you'll also notice, and for those that have used 6th edition before, one of the major changes to the 7th edition is that you can now have hyperlinks. So you can have a blue and underlined hyperlink, and so that is quite all right to have at the very end of your citation. So the next thing we're going to talk about are journal articles without a DOI, and specifically we're going to talk about ones that have no DOI and a print version exists. And so effectively, if you find something through one of our library databases, a print version usually exists. So if you find something with a DOI, include it. If you don't have a DOI and you found it through one of our databases, this is the model that you will follow. So as with a journal article with a DOI, we start out with the author, the date from the little citation statement either at the top or the bottom of the article, then the name of the article title itself, and remember it's sentence case, so we only capitalize the first word here. And then we follow that with the name of the journal, which in this case is a Sociology of Religion, and then that is italicized and all the major words are capitalized. Now, as I said I would mention in the next example, this is an example of a journal article that has a volume and an issue available. Again, sometimes you see VOL and then number or issue. This is how you're going to articulate that. So if you have the volume and the issue, you articulate the volume in italics, and then right after that, you put the issue number. And what you'll notice about the issue is there's no space between the volume and the issue, and that the volume is italicized and the issue is not. We're going to follow that with a comma and then include the page numbers. And so for a journal article without a DOI, this is the end of your citation. This is a drastic change from the 6th edition. But again, if you have an article without a DOI and you found it through a library database, this is all you need to do. Please do not include the database name. Don't put Academic Search Premier. Don't put JSTOR. Don't put a URL from JSTOR or from other sites. This is all you need to do if a DOI is not available and you found it through the library databases. Now let's talk about how to cite books and ebooks in your reference list. So what you'll notice probably more and more is that ebooks and books can have DOI numbers. So if you have a DOI number, you will need to include it. So let's look a little bit more closely at a book citation. So as with the journal article citation, you start out with the author's last name and initials, and this is authored by one person, so we just have one person. We then have the date of the book. Then we include the name of the book, and what you will notice is that the book is in italics, and it also follows sentence case. So you capitalize the first word, and then if you have a subtitle indicated by a colon, you capitalize the first word after that, and then everything else is lowercase, and again, unless of course you have a proper noun, so someone's name. Then at the very end of the name of the book, we put a period, and then we put the name of the publisher. One of the things that you'll see missing from the 6th edition is we used to put the city and state. No longer do you have to put the city and state. Now this is an example of a book with a DOI. So what we do is we include the DOI, so the https://doi.org/ and then the DOI number. And then that is the end of the citation. Now, if you have a book without a DOI, and for most books and ebooks, this is what you're going to find for the most part. And again, so print books or ebooks from academic research databases. So if you go into the library catalog and you find an ebook, this is how you're going to cite it. So here again, we start out with the author. So there's 3 authors for this work. We list them all out, and then we list the date. Then we put the name of the book in italics and then capitalize the first word and the first word after the colon, and that with a period, and then list the name of the publisher, and then we end that with a period, and that is all we need to do. So again, we don't need to put which database we found the ebook in. It doesn't matter. So this is how you cite print books as well as books without DOIs.
The next thing we're going to discuss is APA paper format. There are 2 major paper formats in the APA 7th edition manual. One is a student paper and one is a professional paper. This video is going to talk about how to format a professional paper in APA 7th edition. Professional papers are often used by faculty members if they're publishing individual journal articles, as well as graduate students. Now, for the 7th edition professional paper, we're going to start by talking about the heading. At the very top of your paper, you're going to insert the page or page numbers on the right side, And on the left-hand side, you're going to include a shortened version of your title, not to exceed 50 characters or spaces in all caps. And what you'll notice about the heading is that it's going to be the same on every single page. This is different from the 6th edition, but in the 7th edition, page numbers, shortened version of your title, not to exceed 50 characters or spaces in all caps, and that's all you need. Now, the next thing we're going to do is come down 3 or 4 double spaces, and then we're going to put the title of our paper. Notice that it is in bold and all the major words are capitalized. Then we're going to come down 2 double spaces. We're going to have our name, and then you're going to see a superscripted number. So in this case, we have a number 1, and then I'm going to list my university affiliation, and then I'm also going to precede that with the same superscripted one. Now, the very bottom of the first page of a professional paper is an author note. Please talk to your faculty member and see if you are required to include an author note or not. If you are required to include an author note, I would consider consulting page 35 of the APA 7th edition manual. The second page of most professional papers is the abstract. So you'll notice that the word abstract is capitalized. It is also bold and centered. And then you're going to include your paper abstract. What you'll notice is that the abstracts are limited to no more than 250 words, and they're all going to be evenly left aligned. And then you're going to include the keywords. And so to include the keywords, you will indent, write the word keywords capitalized in italics. You'll notice that it is not bolded. And then you're just going to list all of the keywords that you have chosen for your paper. They will also be italicized. Now we're to the body of your paper. At the top of your paper, you're going to put the full title of your paper that you had articulated on the first title page. And you're going to list that exactly the same here. So again, bold, all the major words are capitalized. And then you're going to start with the text of your paper. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit more about heading levels within your paper. But so while we're still on the paper formatting kick, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to your reference page. The word references is going to be in bold. The word references is capitalized. We don't want to see works cited or references page. We just want references. And then that's going to be followed by a list of all the resources that you use that correspond to an in-text citation within your paper. These are all going to be alphabetized, and you'll notice that there is a hanging indent and everything is evenly double-spaced.
So there are different rules to help dictate what level heading you're actually looking at. So most papers have a level 1 heading, and so a level 1 heading we simply will be centered, it will be bold, and all the major words will be capitalized. Now, if you have a level 2 heading, so you have a subsection of that major section, to indicate to your reader that you have a level 2 heading, what you do is you left align your text. The heading is going to be bold, and you capitalize all the major words, and then your text is going to begin on the next line. Now, most papers will have level 1. Sometimes you'll have level 2. It's more rare to have level 3 in a student paper, but it is a possibility that you might have it. And so to indicate to your reader that you have a level 3 heading, you left align, it is bolded, all the major words are capitalized, but you will also notice that it is italicized. So the final thing we're going to talk about are some key new things with the 7th edition. So the 6th edition was your guide to clear and concise writing. What I really enjoy about the 7th edition is they now have expanded that to be your key to clear, concise, and inclusive writing. On Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, they have a guidance as to how we can be more inclusive. With the 7th edition is the recommendation of the use of the singular they. I'm going to go ahead and read this out because I think they articulate it so nicely. Writers should always use the singular they to refer to a person who uses they as their pronoun. Also use they as the generic third person singular pronoun to refer to a person whose gender is unknown or relevant to the context of the usage. So it is acceptable to use they, them, their, theirs, themselves, or themself. What I also really enjoy about the new manual is on page 121, they include a chart with some examples and strategies for including they as a generic third-person pronoun. The other thing they talk about in Chapter 5, they go into great detail about updated guidance on reducing bias by topic, specifically age, disability, gender, racial and ethnic identity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic. For example, if you're working on a study, they now recommend that instead of using the language under 18 or over 65, that you are specific about the date range. So again, if you want to learn more about this, please consult with Chapter 5 because they do have some updated guidance for bias-free language. So how do you get help with APA 7th edition? The APA Style Guide is actually very, very good. They have excellent examples. They have excellent sample papers. I'll show you that in a second. The library also has a number of help resources. We have updated our library APA handout for 7th edition. We have a citation page with more information. And as you're experiencing right now, the APA writing room workshops will all be 7th edition moving forward. As for locating resources out on the Wild Wild Web, do make sure that if you are looking for resources that you are focusing on things updated to the 7th edition, not the 6th edition. There's still a lot of noise out on the internet with the 6th edition, and there are such significant changes between the two editions that you can't rely on 6th edition materials to help guide you for appropriate citation for 7th edition. One of the sites on the open web that I think has done a really great job with the 7th edition is the Excelsior OWL APA page. One thing I will caution you about is our old friend, the Online Writing Lab by Purdue. There are significant errors on their site for APA 7th, and so at this time I cannot recommend the OWL at Purdue's website for 7th edition citation materials. But the Excelsior OWL does have some really excellent resources that are pretty good. So to get to all of these resources, you can go through the library's homepage. So if you go to library.usca.edu, and if you come over here to the right under Research, the 1, 2, 3, 4th link down says Citations. And once you click on that, you'll be taken to our central page for citation support at the Greg Graniteville Library. And you'll notice that the 3rd tab over says APA 7th edition. On this page, you'll find access to our quick reference guide, which you can use to help you format your references, video tutorials, citation basics, some information on paper formatting, and then also we have links over here to some of the great resources available through APA's page and the Excelsior OWL page. So this concludes my overview of APA 7th edition. Again, my name is Professor Harmon, and I am one of the instruction reference librarians over at the Greg Graniteville Library. If you need our help, go ahead and reach out to us. My email is deborah.t@usca.edu. Alternately, you can access us by going to our library's homepage and reaching out through the Ask a Librarian page. Happy searching!